Zoom just said the recording's in progress, so it must be working. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the third Dialogos with Manuel and Mark and Jules from the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. There needs to be a shorter name for that. This is the third in our Dialogos series. Dialogos is where we are hoping to have something emerge out of the discourse that we have that's greater than the inputs that we all put into it. And that so hopefully we'll emerge out of it wiser and seeing things that we didn't know before. Last time we had Manuel give his presentation about his perspective on the religion that's not a religion and how it references the other topic of human nature, as it's called. He did a great job and was especially focused on the practical groundwork. And I know Mark, who's picking it up today and has been working really hard on the presentation as well, is going to summarize and bring his views in on the question of John Vervaeke's religion that is not a religion. So thanks everyone for whoever has participated in watching and commenting as well. We all really appreciate it and the community building that happens. And I'm just going to throw over to Mr. Mark Lefebvre.
Close enough.
All right.
That's fine. Yeah. Thanks, Jules. This is great. This has been a great series so far, and I'm intimidated by your slides and Manuel's slides because they were so good. So I'm hoping I can rise to the occasion here. But yeah, I wanted to go over a quick summary, and that's sort of where my slide deck starts off. So oh, I can't get my screen to share though. Somebody has not let me share.
Let me see what I can do.
It sounds like something we should have done in prep.
It is.
It was mentioned. We thought we had it.
Give it a go now, Mark.
Much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies.
That's quite all right. So where we left off, Manuel had some wonderful slides on the religion, there's not a religion problem formulation, right? Which is sort of where you started originally, Jules, I think, was in starting that process of problem formulation. And then he went into what he was calling the fundamental problems, right? And we went through all of that. And then we went through ecology of practices. And the way he couched ecology of practices was more in the broader frame of the ecologies that everyone's doing. And then he went into the individual practices themselves, like practices that individuals do as opposed to groups. And the thing that struck me about the presentation was, and I think the question that everybody asks to some extent, especially who's interested in religion that is not a religion in particular, is, well, I just want to do something for me to be more wise and magic will happen, right? But what I'm going to propose here is that we need to take sort of a step back and look at whether or not that's even true, right? Because, basically what I think is going on is there's a problem of perspective. And we need to work that problem out. And that's fundamentally what the religious institutions do, is they provide an additional perspective. And the problem of perspective, roughly speaking, is this idea that inner work and work with others is a limited thing, right? Because all you're doing in that case is you're interacting with yourself and you're interacting with others. And so the only views of the world you have are those two views. And one of the things that leads to is that it's hard to know when to trust yourself or the group, right? Do I trust me? Do I trust the group? Do I trust the me? Do I trust the group? I don't know, because sometimes the group is wrong and sometimes I'm wrong. And there isn't even a good way to say that the group is right more often than than I am. Like that's not even a viable, the viable way to go. And then people get direction from groups. So this is kind of important to know when the group's going astray. And I sort of tie this back to the elephant, right? Which I think is Jonathan Haidt, if I'm getting it correct this time. right? It's this whole idea that, the group is the elephant, like the group dynamics, that's the elephant that the rider is sitting on. But groups actually get direction from individuals or leaders. And so it's not clear to me which should have priority or primacy, right? So that brings up this need for checks and balances, right? You need to have a checks and balance system, say, outside of just the opponent processing system, if we want to invoke John Vervaeke's term, that we would get from individuals versus groups, because there's very much opponent processing. There are individuals shaping groups shaping individuals, all of that's going on, as I pointed out, but we need a check and a balance outside of that framework, we'll call it. And in order to do that, we have to add something like an orientation. So groups and individuals can have directions. Those directions can vary. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, maybe they're roughly in the same direction, but you're too far apart. You need orientation, right? Because I don't know if the direction I'm going in is the same direction as the group is going in, and vice versa. And so that causes a problem with the opponent processing, because it's not opponent, it's not dialogically opponent processing, right? It's not like, oh, these guys are over here and we're over here and there's only two poles. The opponent processing is more like, well, maybe we're going roughly in the same direction, but I want to go more left and you want to go more right, or you want to go more to the center and I want to go more right, whatever that is. There's a lot of possibilities that aren't opposition per se, or aren't direct opposition. And so we need orientation to, provide us with that. And then this is where perspective needs to come in, right? You've got to provide something that's outside that we can have in common, that we can orient towards, right? And that orientation is really, really important. That's kind of the missing component when everybody's talking about this stuff. That seems to be the missing component in what they're talking about with, we'll say, the utility of the religion versus what the religion needs to offer. A religion needs to offer a third perspective outside of the individual and outside of the group. And of course, this is what gets everybody up in arms, right? They don't want the third perspective. They want their perspective, but they'll go for the group perspective is probably better, right? But that's not really what they want. They want their perspective, because they're sure they can convince the group. They'll become the leader. They'll convince the group. They're right, psychologically, that's what we do as humans. So you need this third perspective. You need this common aim, and it has to be common. It can't just be a random aim. Otherwise, you'll get a bunch of little religions that'll fail. And so that, to me, is the missing sort of model in all of the RTNAR discussions that I've seen go on, right? That's where we do have this sort of catastrophic collapse of what we need versus what we have. So what do you guys think about that?
Manuel, you want to go first?
Well, you can go first, it's fine.
I love it. I mean, perspective is everything. I think Alan Kay, Alan Kay, the guy who made the Windows GUI, he was a programmer worth checking out. And I think he said that perspective is worth 80 points of IQ, right? Or a good perspective.
Right.
So I love your point. I think it's totally right. I'm not going to add much more than that, Mark. I think what the third perspective means, I guess you might be elaborating on. So I'll say that.
Yeah. We'll go from here. Don't worry. What do you think, Manuel? I think this ties together your stuff too, right? Because you gave the individual and the group, but you just kind of need that third thing, we'll call it.
Yeah, well, yeah, there needs to be a common aim, or at least a common direction of the aim, and then, well, yeah, then immediately in my mind pops up, well, what's the intelligibility of this common thing, right? Like, how do we, like, even if we are in agreement about the thing, how do we see the same thing? So that's like the big problem that arises for me. And yeah, so I asked the question about something like this to our guest for the Q&A. I'm gonna have to.
Zevi Slavin?
Seven. Yeah, I think so. And I asked, he made a distinction between the mystics that were in the Nazi regime and the mystics that were, well, like in the traditions or whatever. And I said, well, those were bad mystics. And like, well, the people in that empire didn't think so, right? So like how are we gonna resolve that issue? That's most in the foreground for me.
People in the what didn't think it was, sorry?
In the German Empire, right? Like the Third Reich.
Oh, in the
They
right.
did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Manuel's getting at is if you're in the bad mystic camp and they're in the good mystic camp, the people in the bad mystic camp think they're the good mystics and the other guys are the bad, right? And you can never get out of that. You can never get out of that without this third perspective, right? I think that's roughly the problem I'm pointing at. And so just to sort of go over perspective as such, like what are we getting out of perspective? Well, this sort of gives you an idea, right? There's this outside and above you, and then there's humanity. And between you and humanity is this idea of group organization, whether you call that community or culture or, right, it can be, it'll fit a bunch of labels, right? And, you know, your personal organization needs to be aligned with the outside and above, right? And you also need to align with the group. Like there's no way around that in essence. And you know, the idea that humanity has a role to play means that it's determining and being determined by, hence the double arrows, right? The outside and above. And that's human advancement. And then, right, this process I'm calling formation. And I think that's the bottom line is you need some way of modeling it like this so that you can understand the importance of the perspective and what it's actually giving to you, which is this idea of your ability to form yourself, right? And the ability of humanity to form in advancement, whatever that means. And I know they're fuzzy terms, but that's the right. We're just pointing at the things you need to define in order to get RTNAR to be a thing, right? To have some positive affect to it. You need to define what human advancement looks like. You need to define what proper formation is. Like these things but they need to happen. And that third perspective needs to be there in order for them to happen. That's sort of the thesis that I'm operating under. And so that's a way of helping people, you know, sort of understand why perspective is important, what it's giving you, and then get a handle on the things you do need to define in order to move forward with this kind of a project. So what do you guys think of that?
So what comes to mind here, right, is this idea of that there's a select group of people that would be the mystics, going back to the Q&A again, that would be the representative part of humanity in treading that ground, and then they'd have to cohere somehow and translate, right? Because there needs to be a translation. Paul van der Klee talks about this, where a religion is only good if it operates at all levels of understanding. And if you got an IQ of 60, you still have to be able to participate and be able to manage these ideas in an implementable way.
Well said.
I like it a lot. I'm just putting that down as a bit of a triangle here. What I'm taking out of it initially, Mark, is the fixed points in all of this, the constants for you are outside, above, yourself as an individual, and your participation in a group.
Right.
The variables are processes, in other words, things which are fluid, which flow between the constants.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm taking it. But you can't get rid of those constants. And I think,
right.
Just quickly, just to tie it back, I think Manuel made relationship one of his foundations too. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, relationship is definitely yeah. We're definitely chasing the same horse there for sure. Right. But the adding the perspective makes the relationship more complex without being too complex, but also more tenable because, again, it's the one-to-one relationship problem, right? And to Manuel's point, it's all nice and well and good to gin up a religion that you and your high IQ friends can do, but now you just have an exclusive club, right? And so you want to avoid that, and that's what the outside above higher perspective gives you. To his point, like you because we're all participating in humanity kind of by default. You have to organize that. So all right, I'll move to the next slide. So we're talking about the orientation, formation, and this idea of these checks and balances, right? Because now we have the tool of perspective. Now we can do these processes, right? That's where I'm going with this. So there's the question of why orient? Like, what is the purpose of orientation? Well, the purpose is that direction is too simple a process to provide you with what you need, because life puts boulders in your way. And so you can't just walk a straight path and get to wisdom or enlightenment or whatever, right? You can't get anywhere that way because there's all there's a landscape in between you and what you want to get to. And orienteering is the process of calculating, well, if I go around this mountain or this rock or this whatever or this ravine, then I have to go in this direction, not the direction I want to go in. And then how do I get back? And that's why you have orienteering compasses. That's what they're for. It's great fun, by the way. If you haven't done a class on orienting, it's kind of fun. Orienteering is a great thing to learn. And that, we need to know that, right? The religion needs to know that it's doing orientation for people, that it's providing people with the tools to do the orientation, not just the aim, but also tools to orient, right? To figure out, well, if you get off the path, you could go this way to get back, right? Or maybe there's a different path. Like if you get off the path, maybe that path was wrong for you, or you can take this path and it'll get you to the same place. All of that is orienting. And then there's the question of what we orient on, because this kind of matters. Like, what do we orient on? That's a good question. What do we orient on? And the answer is something, right? And so RTNAR, in order to be successful, is going to have to answer that question too, right? Not just why we orient, but what we're orienting on. Like, where are we going? What's the purpose? What's the top aim? What is it? Just wisdom? What the hell is wisdom? Like this, these things aren't necessarily helpful without a larger frame, right? And then it has to answer, what is formation? Because the process of moving through this or moving towards enlightenment or moving towards wisdom is a type of formation of the human. And we're forming ourselves. And in forming ourselves, we're also forming whatever it is we're moving towards, right? It's this mutual relationship that John talks about. And what does that look like? Like, you have to define it. Like, RTNAR is gonna have to define what formation looks like within its a framework. Like, that framework has to be there, right? And then how does all this impact our formation? Well, we've got orientation, we've got formation. The impact is, well, we need checks and balances, right? Because we can't just say, oh, you always form yourself into this. Like, everybody's not going to be able to do that unless evolution isn't real, but I kind of think it is. And then, what's the impact of that? Well, the formation itself is going to take you off the path, right? And so you need more orientation. And then what the orientation informs your formation, right? And so it's all about that. And so that's why we need a system of checks and balances, right? We can't count on people to make forward progress all the time in a direction. We need orientation, and we also can't count on the orientation system and the formation that we do to be reliable enough to always get people where they need. So we also need to add in a system of checks and balances so that we're constantly figuring out, how far off the path am I? Do I need a new path? If I get a new path, what does that mean for my formation? What things do I need to form into? Because maybe you need to form into a good husband, right? But then when you have a baby, you need to form into a good father. Unless that's not your goal, right? In which case you can be a deadbeat dad and leave your kid. But, and then that's for the higher aim. Oh, maybe that's bad for society or something. I don't know, right? But it could be. And so you need to answer all these questions around formation and what the impacts of formation are, because they change the orientation of you in the moment. they shouldn't change the higher aim, but they should change your orientation. And so you need these systematic checks to go back and say, oh, this is where you're gone wrong, and this is where the orientation failed you, or this is why you can't orient, or whatever it is. And so that I think is again, because we've been afforded this by the perspective, that I think is all the set of questions that need to be answered around orientation and formation and this whole checks and balance system. What do you guys think of that thesis?
Perfectly plausible, well explained. You're saying that we need to orient ourselves on an outside perspective, and in the process of doing that, we are being formed, if it's a good orientation, presumably. That being said, if you're all aiming for something, question mark, and by virtue of that, you're being formed into something, you've got to be able to say, is that good or bad? I hope I've got it right.
Right.
Anyone?
Yeah, so when I'm looping this through my head, I get layers, right? Like where there's an orientation of the individual, but then there's an orientation of the potential as well, and then they're in competition, and so there's and then for example, if you're a dad or a husband, right, like, do you privilege becoming more spiritual and developed as a human, or are you going to implement the thing in the here and now so that you can get up in the morning and do your task in the house or whatever, right? Like, so there's these different levels that are in tension with each other, and like I don't really see a good way to resolve that tension. So yeah, like that seems like a highly complex system that you'd have to set up there.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I'm glad you brought up tension, because I think a lot of the fights over, oh, I fell out of, name your religion for a reason, are that tension, right? Or are the result of that tension. And we're human, so we implement things badly, including religions. And, Paul van der Clay talks about this a lot, right? He talks about, look, churches aren't perfect. They all suck and they all have problems. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to one. You should, like, you still need the church, even though they're suboptimal, we'll call it. And he had a great video. I forget what it was called, but he basically talked about how the reputation of Jesus is intact. Like, everybody likes Jesus, but people don't like the church, because the church is not, right, is not Jesus. It's not living up to the ideal of Jesus per se. And that's a problem, because there's all these tensions. And one of the tensions, to your point, Manuel, is the implementation is always a tension with the ideal. And it's nice and well and good to talk about RTNAR in terms of ideal, and that's great. You can philosophize about it all day, but when you go to implement, you're going to have all kinds of problems. And that's part of the system of checks and balances. Like, it's got to be very complex in some sense. Not that, I mean, it's complex in the sense that when you implement a lot of simple checks and balances and you have a tension between these levels of analysis, we'll call them, you're going to end up with a complex system, whether you like it or not. And you're just going to have to deal with that, because I don't think there's a way around it, in essence. Does that make sense? Does that ring true, Manuel, to what you were on about?
Yeah, well, it is unavoidable, right? Like, and then so one of the purposes of religion is affording a person to forgo the here and now in order for something in the future.
Yes.
Or in the eternal even. So yeah, right, like that, and then that also needs to have a way of being imposed, at least morally. So yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments, Jules, or what do you think?
Manuel and I have talked about this before. I don't like the impose bit, but maybe that's just a perspective thing. Presumably, there is an imposition from internal, probably your conscience, which can impose on you. That's as far as I would take that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, just to flip back real quick, I mean, I think that, this slide of organization and formation implies an imposition from the outside and above, right? Everything's sort of in some sense subservient to it, because, it has to in some sense, right? Because it has to be the thing you move towards. And if it's the thing you move towards, just that fact alone is an imposition, because now you can't move any other place. You can't move in any other way. You can't move towards any other aim. So the imposition is sort of implicit in my mind, because of the fact that you need the outside and above perspective in order to orient.
Understood. I also realized I just kind of broke a rule of Dialogos by not amplifying Manuel's point, which I should have done. Apologies, Manuel.
No, it's fine. Like
Yeah,
tension is part of the system.
yeah, no, totally. I don't want to interrupt the flow, so I'll park it.
Yeah. So one of the missing components, we'll say, to RTNAR boils down to something that I sort of stumbled across when listening to Jordan Peterson talk, we'll say, right, which is there are these psychological affordances that are granted to us as the result of belief as such. And then we use ineffable, right? That's our placeholder for belief in something higher, right? In a higher aim, we'll say, outside of, we'll just maybe objective material reality, right? Like we're just outside of that. And I just wanted to go through these because I think they're important, because what I'm trying to highlight here is how the individual practices and the group practices are cohering to a third perspective, and that, or they need to, right? And that third perspective is the thing that also scaffolds and buttresses and gives us a structure that enables us to transform, right? And so, because psychologically we have problems, right? Psychological problems to some extent, right? Greater or lesser. And then just knowing about those problems isn't enough. You actually have to address them with practices. Fair enough. That's what practices, right? And, wisdom is not some, magical force that makes everything okay. And you can't even move towards it in some sense, because we have a hard time even defining it. And so psychology is a lot easier handle to talk about these things. So what are the psychological affordances, we'll say, of having that higher aim, that ineffable sense? Well, redemption from and for a group, right? Sam Harris did this talk on Joe Rogan a while back, and he was on the verge of tears, right? He's like, I don't understand why people can't forgive this person. Well, the reason why is because people can forgive him, but plural people can't. Right? Any individual person can forgive him in Sam's model, because Sam doesn't have an ineffable. He doesn't have anything above Sam. Sam's the highest order. Right? Everybody's their own highest order in his mind. Well, then we can't agree on what to, right, where to forgive. And it's like, well, we could have a group of people agree. Yeah, maybe. But you still need to appeal to something outside of the group in order for the group to be safe. Right? Groups aren't safe when they're just a group, because leaders can lead groups astray. So you still need that higher appeal. You still need that. That's where you get the authority to grant forgiveness. And that it's the same with groups themselves. Like, well, not every person in that group is good. Fair enough. But at some point, you got to take your losses. And who's going to decide who to take the loss? Because everybody who's forgiving people will take different sets of losses. Somebody's got to be the authority and say, no, we can forgive that group, even though there's a few bad apples, because we think the group will self-correct. And in order to do that, you need this higher frame. Like, you're not going to get around the higher frame in order to make that happen. There's no way to do it. And that's important, because without that, you just have yourself ultimately. And again, if you have a leader in a group, they need that, because otherwise they can corrupt the group. I mean, we've seen this in history. This isn't a mystery or anything, right? Like, it's happened in history kind of recently, right? There's been some world wars around this whole problem. These leaders lead things astray, right? So that's why you need that third frame, that ineffable frame to look up to, in essence. And then, another affordance is this narrative enactment, right? So we have to be able to string our lives together in some intelligible fashion, and that, for better or for worse, is narrative. We need narrative. We can't really do without it. That's the thing that we can rely on, we'll say, above and beyond memory, to make a cohesive way of relating to the world intelligible to us and others. Right? People often ask you, hey, what's your story? Like, oh, I have a story. Yes, you have to have a story so other people can relate to you. And having a sense of the ineffable, having something not just about the group, because if the only story you have is related to a group, that's identity. That's not a narrative. And now you're stuck in identity politics. That's not good. Like, we've seen the results of that. Very bad, right? You need a narrative that encompasses more than one identity, because you're more than one identity. You're more than one thing. You may be a husband, you may be a father, right? You may be a son, right? You like necessarily, right? You have whatever profession you have, right? And then you have friend relationships that are different. You might have a friend on Discord who, like, without whom you could do nothing, all right? Because he's good and disagreeable, right? And you have all these identities and relationships to things, and those have narratives in and of themselves. And then there's a grand narrative of your life, which is sort of harder to tell, but you need that. And what bucket does that sit in? Again, it can't sit in the group. That's an identity. It has to sit in a higher frame. It has to be in relation to something higher, that ineffable. I don't think there's a way around that, but doing that gives us the psychological strength to move in a direction. No one's going to do anything, that lasts by moving in the direction of a single identity, especially a self-defined identity. And a group identity is only going to get you so far until you run out of causes, right? Once you accomplish the cause, you're done. That's it. Now you're useless. No, you need something higher. You need something outside yourself. You need something outside the frame to move to, and you need a way to navigate that. And that navigation is part of the narrative. And then the natural rights, those don't spring from nature. Nature in and of itself is something ineffable to us. I mean, you can make the argument that science knows everything about nature. Of course, it's not even close, but it knows something about nature. Yeah, fair enough, but doesn't know everything. So there's some aspect of the ineffable there. And then the way to protect your right is to have a frame in which you can claim an equality to others along some axes, not an equity, but an equality. Like, oh, I'm a human, you're a human. In the fact that we're human, we're equal. In the fact that we have psychological problems, we're equal, right? You need a frame to do that in. You need something that provides that space. And it's the ineffable. It's that idea of the potential and the access and the ability, right? It needs to be invoked in order to give us a space to have an equal footing, right? And to find an equal footing and to cooperate together as even a group. And all of those things are, some of the first three of what are 12 psychological affordances. And I'm not claiming a complete list. This is just a list that we've come up with on the server. I didn't come up with all of them, obviously. This is just work that Manuel and I primarily, but Andre and Michelle and a bunch of other people have been contributing to, whether they realize it or not, in some cases. And this is why that third perspective, that thing is important, because it gives you these psychological affordances. And so that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think that outside of the utility of the third perspective that we went over earlier, there is this psychological utility that helps us to be generative and get better. So what do you guys think of the first three psychological affordances?
after you, Manuel.
Yeah, so it's nice to see the list again. It's old data for me. Yeah, my mind was going to forgive yourself, right? Like redeem yourself. We see a lot of people struggle with forgiving themselves. When you look at Vivek's meditation series, he's really insistent on not blaming yourself or and treating yourself with care, and a lot of people seem to need to grasp onto something in order to forgive themselves, right? Because if the world isn't perfect and like you're the cause of things in the world, right, or at least you perceive yourself like that, then that giving someone something outside the responsibility for what happens or for that things go right frees you up internally. So that's important. Maybe that's later on the list, but I don't know. So yeah, the narrative, right? Like narratives, we will always have narratives in some sense, right? Like, so it's the cohesion of these narratives and the sharing of them and the agreement upon them that is essential there. And then, right, like I want to expand natural rights more in and Jules is gonna like this, right? Like understanding who we are, right? Like what is it that I am as a being in the world that I'm, and like what are the other beings, and like how am I similar? So yeah, that's is not really a narrative, but more a contextualization of where you're at, I guess.
I like that. Yeah, we missed redemption for yourself. And we should put that in the list. We'll have to edit the document. That was a good catch, though. I like that. Yeah, I like that we're revisiting the list. I mean, this was one of the first things that we got in the big notes pages that we have, the 300 plus pages. So, what do you think, Jules? What's your opinion on this?
Well, you've cast a really wide net there. Probably, you could almost say the widest possible. And clearly, that's what this game is about. I might riff off our man Manuel's last point and see if I can work backwards. I like the twist you put on that, actually, Manuel. That natural rights, obviously, the first thing you think about is really things more like John Locke and Thomas Aquinas. But you're sort of taking it more into the existential there and talking about how, even as someone who exists, and I don't want to go too airy-fairy on this, but simply the fact that you're there and someone else is there, doesn't that tell you something about your similarity? I might even just throw in a little bit there about a guy called Levinas, who was into the existential stuff in a big way. And he was focused on the face, where he was saying, if you look properly at the face of another, he's all about the other. He says there's no way you can deny their existence and their humanness, as it were. And I suppose to your point, Mark, if I could call it your point, since it's so crowdsourced in a way, you know, I'd be all for that way of looking at the world myself, giving dignity to others just by the fact that they exist. Back to narrative, what jumped to mind, Mark, was more celebrities, to be honest. What I'm trying to do is make this a bit more cohesive in my mind. Celebrities as in the way we understand it today, like, I don't know, Billie Eilish or someone like this, someone in the popular culture who everybody recognizes as an icon. And, you know, I can say that name and I think both of you guys probably will go, oh yeah, I know who you're talking about, even though we've never met her, blah, blah, blah. Manuel shakes his head, no idea.
Unfortunately, I know who she she is. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to show how hip I am, right? I know she's got green hair. But really the point is, just to enhance your point a bit, I think you've been calling this the ineffable. I think this is your, what did you call it originally on the top of the triangle? The outside perspective?
Yeah.
Okay.
The outside perspective. Sure.
Right. Now, I might try and just enrich that slightly and say maybe that could also be called the transcendent. And I'm going to go devil's advocate here on John Vervaeke's side. I listened a little bit to him and Zevi talking about religion that's not a religion. I think that was episode 1 of their 4-parter. And what struck me again was how John's saying we've got to exact from the existing traditions into something new. And his new, I think, involves very, very heavily the idea of the transcendent through mysticism, basically. Now, why I'm thinking about celebrities for narrative there is what's interesting about the cult that goes around celebrity, which I think is really defining for young people, especially. Most of their world can revolve around these figures and how they role model and how they define and how they can create transcendent group experiences. You go to some sort of concert where there's music and there's dance and there's different kind of art going on, and you feel like you're being, going through a transcendent experience. Now, I'd argue that leaves you pretty empty if that's your main thing. Anyway, that's not to sound curmudgeonly, but I suppose what's interesting there is how people who are participating in that form of narrative still have some ineffable experience, some sort of transcendent that goes with the story. I belong to this group. They define who I am. I wear the t-shirt, etc. I don't think I've really made a specific argument. That's what it made me think of. And I think finally, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I just wanted to riff on that. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, please.
I mean, really I think what you just said was, boy, there's a lot of mysticism out there already, guys. How are you going to compete with that? And I think that's exactly the point. Like, you cannot compete with celebrity and in-group preference and those things the way they're implemented today. This is more along the lines of Pastor Paul Vanderklay talking about platforms. I think platforms is not the best way to think about it, although I understand why he's using that model, and that's a decent enough model, right? Mm-hmm. When you have this system like this, where you can get bang, quick transformative experience through 3.5 minutes of music and identifying with the green-haired freaky person who talks about horrific things in her songs. Wow, I've got a sense of belonging, right? I've got a narrative, or at least what seems like a narrative, right? But it's not lasting. And the reason why the perspective is important is because it gives you that lasting aspect, right? You can get that for a minute or 2, or 3 or 4, right? And you can sort of pretend like that's your identity when you're walking down the street or whatever, but at the end of the day, you still got to eat and do dishes and blah, right? And then you need a narrative to weave all that together. And maybe you can get around some of that for a while, but eventually it all catches up to you, right? And so what are the mystics competing with? Well, they're competing with celebrity. And that's why I don't think mysticism is a path. And I think you need to start with that top thing, whatever it is. And I don't know that John uses the word transcendent. Transcend what? To where? Right. And this is very much to the point of psychological affordances. Like, well, what are you transcending? Well, you're right. This is what you're transcending. So sorry, continue with your.
Don't apologize. I love it.
I wanted to add something to this, right? Like, Peterson talks about this idea that when there's this void inside of you, right, you'll grab the first thing that sufficiently fills that void, and then you'll treat it as a solution, right? Like, partially because you don't know better, and then in order to let go of that again, right? Like, it's your salvation in some sense, right? So then you're gonna have to let loose that thing that saved you in order to go to this new thing. And then, well, yeah, if you want to make that sell, then you need to have a really good story.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to continue with what both of you are saying. I think all of this points to the question of quality. What is the quality of this ineffable thing? So to, again, Zevi's point that I wasn't there for, but if he's saying there's undoubtedly a quality to Nazi mysticism, is that a good quality? Maybe for them at the time, and that points to the deep nature of self-deception.
And how do you know? Right. This is the question you didn't answer that Manuel brought up a couple times to me, and I was like, yeah, how do you know? Right.
Yeah, I won't touch that yet because that's a huge one.
Well, but you need the ineffable. Like you need a thing there to point to. Otherwise, you don't know if the mysticism of the green-haired freaky singer is a good mysticism, because like we have mysticism everywhere, near as I can tell. It was like, oh, we need more mysticism. Like, no, we have too much mysticism. Thank you very much. We need more ineffable.
Yeah. I don't want to sidetrack because you've got a whole thing going a direction here. That question of the difference between, can I put a pin in that? The question of the difference between the mystical and the ineffable. I won't argue it, but it's really important, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
But just quickly to your point about redemption, again, I'm trying to make this a little concrete. Where what came to my mind there, Mark, was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which I know very little about, but I know enough to get a taste of the power of that forgiveness, where you see, oh God, it makes me emotional just thinking about it. Just, maybe, I think I saw a video of like a mother maybe, or, the parent of someone who was murdered by someone sitting there, forgiving the murderer. That's unbelievable. So it's extraordinarily powerful. And that's why I think I'm saying it's such a broad thing. Even coming close to that gives me a transcendent experience, even that idea. I look at that and I go, that's hard to touch. That's hard to get to. Yeah,
there's no rationality that's going to lead you there, right? And that's it's a good point. I didn't have more notes for our notes. Yeah, that idea of redemption beyond the moment, right, and into the future, right? Because at some point you have to cut your losses. Like at some point you have to cut your losses, because if you're just carrying that baggage around forever, right, then it gets too much and it overwhelms you. It's sort of like the thing that Peterson talks about with, I think it's Franz de Waals, right, and the chimps. Yeah, the tyrant chimp can be there for a little while, but not as long as a non-tyrant chimp, because you build up all this stuff and eventually it's too much. Like you can't manage that, at least throughout time. You can't manage it. And so it's important to know that. So yeah, I can totally, I see your point there. Yeah, and that's the lovely part about this list. It's so deep. Like we have these bullet points. These are just 12 items, and then I added the text in the middle of the bullets, right? Basically, and look at how much richness we've gotten out of it so far. So, yeah,
powerful.
Shall we move on? Okay. So what we have here is the next three, right? So this idea of humility, right? Like you need something to judge your actions, and it can't be the group, because groups go wrong. There has to be something to orient the group's judgment and your judgment of yourself too. And that's that third thing. That's the ineffable. That's the higher frame. You're not going to get around that in order to engender proper humility. And you see this in cults, right? Cults have a bunch of arrogant, egoist bastards for a reason, because there's no way out. Like a cult is self-referential, and people just build up and build up and build up and build up and build up until the cult explodes. You see that with the cult in Waco. I forget the name of the David Koresh's group there. They had some fancy churchy sounding name, right? But it started out, if you listen to any of the stories from people who were in it, it started out innocent and good enough, but because of self-referencing nature, he lost his humility. And he was humble in the beginning, and then he wasn't. And maybe he was always a psychopath in the making. I don't know. But had the members had a way out, a way to proper humility for themselves, and to understand the humility of their leader had been lacking, then maybe that wouldn't have happened, right? And again, that's why you need that ineffable. But you're not really going to get around that. And then this idea of reciprocal opening that John is so fond of, or reciprocal widening, I think is what Pastor Paul calls it, which might be better. If it's you in the group, your options are kind of limited, right? Like you're either operating as an individual or you're operating as an individual part of the group. And maybe you're running the group too, right? Because there's that leadership aspect and there's lots of give and take there, but there's really limited possibilities for potential for things to spring out, for generative things to happen. And so you need the ineffable not only to aim you, but also to give you the space of generative action per se. And so RTNAR has to address this. Like it has to have a way to engender reciprocal opening towards something that's infinitely large, in essence, that's ineffable. That's why we call it the ineffable. And that's really important. You need that aspect of reciprocal opening in order for things to work psychologically. Otherwise, when you're in a cult, you're just all about the cult, and cults don't really do any good in the world, right? And that's why, because they can't reciprocally open. That they're self-referential and they're closed off worlds, and they eventually hopefully collapse, but maybe they survive for a long time. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. What matters is they don't have that aspect of reciprocal opening that a true religion, a healthy religion, might need. And so that's one of the psychological affordances that is required if you're going to build this religion that's not a religion. And then number 6 here is this idea of continuity. And I invoke time here specifically because continuity just isn't the physical material reality continuity. There's also continuity that exists on top of that. And having this idea of common aim, right, of something above us that we're sort of looking at, lets us measure. Again, you need that third measurement to do the triangulation, literally, right, to figure out whether or not things are good and bad, because things don't exist on a good-bad scale. Good and bad exist on a larger frame. Like sometimes we have to take the hit now to get the advantage later. And how do you know that if you're measuring good and bad on a line? You're never going to get it measuring good and bad on a line, because the line means one moment, this moment. It's always going to be egoistic and egoic rather, and narcissistic. And we need a way to validate how well we're living in the moment, to give us that sense of continuity with respect to how we're living in the future and how we lived in the past. And the only way to do that is to have this sense of continuity across time. And the ineffable frame gives us that, because it adds the time component as well as the sacrificial component. It's all in there, right, to the point of redemption, to the first point. It's all in there. The continuity is required. And you can see how these sort of things, they knit together in a neat way. So what do you guys think of those 3 psychological affordances?
So I'm going to start with the continuity across time, because I'm thinking of Peterson, and he's talking about how the continuity of culture allows us to have contracts, right? Because there needs to be this inherent reliability that we can rely upon the future in order to plan upon it, right? And I think the case that you're making is like, no. Like, you shouldn't be relying on the culture for the contract. No, you need to have another reference point, because how else are you going to bootstrap when the culture is bad, right? Like when it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at that. And reciprocally opening is important. There's also a combinatorily explosive way of doing that. So maybe there's an orientation aspect relevant there as well, that the ineffable provides us a way to realize which openings are relevant and which aren't. And the humility, that my favorite thing. Yeah, it is. Well, yeah, I've been in this frame for a long time, where when you have to submit to something, right, which would be a subgroup of humanity, you still have to submit, right? Like there's still an element of humility required there, but it's really, really hard to justify it, right? Like your ego can just run off and say, yeah, I'll go join this other group, or like there's all of these ways that you can talk that straight for yourself. So yeah, and in order to get true humility, like maybe there needs to be a sense of permanence, and maybe also a sense of a developing relationship that is consistent across time. To loop it back, Jules.
You're muted, Jules.
Sorry,
There we go.
distracted.
Okay.
I love what you just said about humility, because I suppose running through Mark's presentation and his thought here is, if I'm not wrong, Mark, is what is the quality of this outside perspective? What is the quality of this ineffable? And I think what you just said about humility sums up, I don't know, not a lot of it, but it sums up a very critical part of it. And how you were saying, Manuel, about how being part of a group requires humility. There's something really strong and powerful about that for me. I think it does too. Like,
Oh yeah.
I don't think I need to add to that, but how we get to it, I suppose, is another question. I might jump over reciprocal opening. There was two different strands there, which is, I suppose, that's John's idea, right? Reciprocal opening.
Yes.
And then tying that into potential. Again, Mark, you've got a wealth of ideas to plumb, and I think if I went down there, it'd be a whole nother thing. So I'll skip it.
Fair enough.
That's a compliment. Continuity across time. I see the point there. Again, that really raises the question of the quality of the ineffable. So I just keep coming back to that.
Yeah, we're probably not going to get around that whole thing, right? And part of this is to show the difficulties in the project, right? That's part of the purpose, right? Is to problem definition. What are all the problems we need to solve? And it's good too, because we're seeing, or at least I'm seeing, I hope everybody else is seeing this too. This is one of the early notes where the affordances for the ineffable, like this is one of our earliest sets of notes and constructs in the notes. And it's interesting to see how that fits into the newer work that we've done around perspective, for example, and what we've learned since we did this. And so that's becoming apparent as we look at it and as we revisit it now. But I think you have to go through this, like you have to provide these psychological affordances somehow. And
it's hard. Sorry to jump in quickly, but sure. It's hard not to see how you're embodying the very point you're making, which is looking back over time and seeing what's changed.
Yeah, thanks for that call out. Yeah, very much. And I think that's Yeah, we could have a whole talk on imitation and the mimicry and things like that. So then we get into um, this idea of adapting to the world, because there's a random component to the world, right? And that's what number 7 really speaks to, is that like things happen randomly, otherwise nothing would happen, and so, or nothing would have started happening, we'll say. And so we need a way to deal with that. And because this is kind of everywhere, but we have a certain intelligibility, like science has all these things, right? And then medicine has all these things. And then there's the placebo effect. It's like, well, we need a way to deal with that. We can't just say, oh, placebo effect and science can't explain it, therefore. That doesn't work. I mean, now you're outside of the scientific frame entirely. And this has been pointed out actually to John. J.P. Marceau pointed this out to John and said, oh, that's magic. And I think John sort of agreed. Yeah, oh, okay, that's a good explanation for magic right there. Like, how are you going to get around that scientifically? You're not. It's never going to happen. Like, the placebo effect is just an effect nobody can account for. And they can say it's psychological in nature. Like, I don't know what that even means at that point. Like, does that mean we're masters of our own body, right? Internally, because we don't seem to be, because it's not reliable. But I mean, it's reliable in one sense, but it's not reliable in individuals. Can't use it reliably. But it's reliable across groups, which is a very interesting way to think about things. But we need a way to explain that psychologically. We can't just say, oh, science doesn't know and therefore. We don't like that. It's better to have a word like magic, or the ineffable did it, right? The ineffable caused that, right? And there's lots of examples of this, right? Planes fall out of the sky, nobody knows why. Sometimes we never know, right? There's things like the Bermuda Triangle. I think there's all kinds of crazy things going on in the world that we just actually don't have an explanation for. And you can always make the argument that with just a little more data, we'd have that explanation, but that doesn't appear to be true. There's lots of things we have a ton of detail and data on, and we still have no idea. And at the quantum level, it's certainly not true, right? You get down to the quantum level and it turns out everything's subjective. Everything's observation, all right? And you can double slit experiment, observation changes the result. You can look at the quantum eraser, and then it's all thrown out the window. Like, yeah, it's all observation, or there's an ineffable. You get to pick which one, but you're not getting around that. I actually talked to Karen Wong about this. We did a talk on Tuesday. We went into that. Her physicist talk too. She has a physicist talk that she released. I think it was the last video that she released, where they talk about that too, because they go over Lawrence Krauss and his ridiculous formulations and how they don't work. And we need an adaptation to these things we can't explain. There's lots of stuff in the world we can't explain. And if we're not smart enough to know everything, we can't explain it for ourselves. And so where do we appeal to? We can either appeal to an authority. Oh, somebody somewhere knows about it. Maybe, maybe not, but we still don't, right? Or we can appeal to a higher authority, the ineffable. And then that gives us some comfort, psychologically speaking. And then sort of the next one is around responsibility. What's the right amount to take for the world around us? Like, we were born. This happened sort of without our approval. Maybe, maybe not, but maybe. Sam Harris has a point. Only 2, and that's one of them. So yeah, maybe we didn't get a decision about whether or not we were born, or maybe we did and we don't remember. I don't know, Sam, but you didn't consider the other possibility, by the way. But I did. But even so, once we're born, what's the level of responsibility as we grow up? I mean, obviously, when you're a baby, you can't be responsible for anything. You're a freaking baby. Like, hello, right? There's a development that happens, and past a certain point of development, though, then there's some responsibility. How much should we take? How much are we able to take? Like, is it responsible of me to expect somebody with an IQ of like 80 to be responsible for something? No, right? No, there's certain things they can't be responsible for because of their limitations as a result of their birth. So it's not just my limitations I'm worried about, it's everybody else's limitations. And, where does that sit? And who takes the responsibility that we don't? Because we can't just assign it randomly. Oh, it's my parents. Oh, it's this person. Oh, it's this group. We can't do that. That doesn't work. Like, they also can't take the responsibility. And again, we get into orientation. Even if you do that, you still need that third perspective to have proper orientation, to do the checks and balances, the triangulation on the responsibility. Like, that's required. You're not going to get around that, I think. And then my last one on this slide, and then we have one more slide, of course, is this access to justice. And justice is maybe a virtue, right? Something like that. And I mean, this is connected to our rights. But again, justice can't be whatever the group says. Like mob rules doesn't work. And so if mob rules doesn't work, and you can always make the argument that any judicial system you put together is a mob, that should be obvious, but I guess I have to say these things. That's a mob, maybe an organized mob, but it's still a mob of people. There's a bunch of individual people there doing bad things. Justice in the United States is completely effed, for lack of a better term. It's totally chaotic. They don't follow any of their own rules even, because it's a mob rule, and the mob has kind of taken over, and there's all these money interests involved. And so you don't have access to justice necessarily. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't. And how do we adjust something like the justice system if the justice system is supposed to provide justice and it's not? How do we know, and how do we adjust it? Well, you need the ineffable. You need that psychological affordance, that thing to appeal to make that triangulation and say, oh no, this has gone horribly wrong. We need to fix it. You need that. You need that idea outside of yourself and outside of the group in order to adjust the group, whatever that group is. And in this case, there's a couple of arms of justice in the United States, right? We've got the voting system that's supposed to lead to people writing just laws. And then we've got the implementation arm, which is roughly speaking the judicial arm, right? But those things don't balance themselves off because they're just two groups. They're not appealing to that higher ineffable frame either. And so again, you need that, and you need the psychological affordance for yourself. So how do you guys like these next three here?
Yeah, these are gonna be a little bit harder to respond to, I guess. Randomness, right? Like not only dealing with it, but engaging with it, having the faith that you will be able to manage the thing that you don't know. You don't want to be paralyzed by fear. Really, really, really important. Like people intuitively do this, but you might lose this capacity in your life, and then you need to regain it for yourself. Responsibility. I don't like responsibility. You can have it. So I'll be irresponsible in not comment on that. Justice, right? Like we go to the Greek idea, right? It's things being in right relationship. How do you define right relationship? This is also related to the orientation question, like how do you aim? Well, yeah, right relationship. Well, like where do you get that right relationship? How do you get that? What's the implication of the highest frame being there for the relationship, and how to self-generate the solution in the moment, because that's the point that we need to get to, right? Like we're the vehicle of implementation of things, and we need to have the ability to transform ourselves into what the situation requires us to be. And that's it.
Hard to reconcile your last point with your second point, Manuel, if you don't like responsibility. I say with love.
Well, I don't have to like it, right?
Oh, I see. All right. It's about preference. I got you. Yeah, I agree with Manuel. These are heavy, heavy points. Maybe not the first one so much. So you're saying, Mark, that a recognition of the ineffable affords you psychologically a better adaptation to randomness.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, it gives you a place to put it.
Say again.
Gives you a place to put it, right? Because you're going to encounter randomness, and like you can't just explain it away in some sense. You got to have a way to explain it, and that's the ineffable.
Right. Is that where you were talking about Lawrence Krauss?
Well, to some extent, yeah. I mean, well.
Okay, yeah.
But talking about
It
him
was.
as waste of time in some sense, because he just pulls a bunch of verbal magic on people, and he should have his physics degree revoked after that talk with Peterson. And if you watch the talk with Karen Wong and her physicist friend that she just put out recently, he basically rips Krauss apart very nicely. Way too kind. Like, I'm not that kind or that patient, but he just points out all kinds of problems with what Krauss comes up with. And Krauss is one of those people that's, basically, like, his knowledge of physics seems to be inferior to mine, and I never took a college course in my life, so I don't understand him. He seems kind of dumb. Sorry, and he uses the weasel words, right? He uses scientific word, mystical word, mystical word, and he doesn't define any of the mystical words because he can't. And fair enough, but like, don't do that. That's a ridiculous way to have a conversation, in my opinion. Be honest, right?
Well, they are really big points, and the reason I was questioning about Lawrence Krauss actually was this view of, okay, there's one view which is a vis-a-vis randomness, and maybe I could throw in there uncertainty, like our friend Mr. Taleb. That there are things out of your control, there are things that are unknown, etc. Maybe I could put that something in the same category. And there's a future which nobody knows.
Right.
I think it bears back to your point number 6, actually, about continuity over time. And what I'm trying to get to here is there's one view which is it's only a matter of time before we know. And therefore, there's no need for an acceptance of the ineffable or the fact that there is an unknown.
Exactly. The expectation that we will know prevents us from engaging with what we don't know.
Yeah, right. There's a sort of a foreclosure, and maybe, to use one of John Vervaeke's words, and maybe the emphasis should be on the word closure. Right. And kind of maybe in doing that, you close off part of your soul, I'm actually going to use that word, to a dimension of life which is real but not scientific. I would say that too. It's not necessarily apprehensible scientifically. So, of course, the other view, thank you. Yeah, the other view is, I really like, there's that lady called Maria Popova who's got this website, Brain Pickings. And one time she really goes into depth about meaningful topics. And one time she was talking about this idea called negative capability, which was coined by a chap whose name I can't remember. But he was talking about the importance of developing a negative capability in yourself, which is the acceptance of the fact that there are things you will never know. There are things about living that you will never understand fully. And being able to position yourself, let's go back to what you said earlier, Mark, being able to orient yourself that way. Quite fortuitously leads us to your point number 8, which is the inability to do that actually leads you to taking on probably too much responsibility. The whole Atlas thing, the world is on my shoulders, Invictus, I am the captain of my soul, and so on. I've been there, and it's unbearable. But it's also unbearable to let it go. That's a quandary. I'm not actually holding out a solution. Obviously, I believe there are some, but I think RTNAR hopefully can work a solution out for that kind of conundrum.
Well, finally, I wanted to add the thing where, like, when you take a road, like, another road closes every time, right? And this is a thing that people don't recognize. Is like, I'm doing this thing, and then they judge this thing whether it's good or bad, and they don't consider the alternative as a thing, right? And then maybe this thing is good, right, because it's improving you, but because there's way better, it's bad. And then to connect that back to you, right? Like we are not going to be able to pick all the options that are in the world, but we still have a relationship to all the options, and well, yeah, the randomness, respecting the randomness and the potential that's there.
Yeah, I mean, it's opportunity cost, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, so I won't hold it up, but I mean, justice is a biggie. Yeah. So how does the ineffable afford an appeal to justice? Well, you're saying, I guess, Mark, that because it's an outside perspective, which we begin to get an understanding of the quality of, like we think the ineffable is a certain kind of thing, which I presume is just. The ineffable is just.
Or at least contains justice. Yeah. Or
Right.
at least provides justice. Like, for example, if somebody stole everything that you owned, which might have happened to me twice, that those people, because the justice system on earth did not do its job,
Yes.
right? Those people might meet justice eventually, right? That might be very handy to have psychologically so that you don't get into a vengeance war, right?
Very good. Yeah. As far as I can tell, the further we get on in life, the more we understand getting a satisfactory sense of justice just never comes into our grip. And I'm pretty sure that's where the notion of poetic justice comes into it, where, you know, we watch these films about revenge, or we watch any film basically where there's an injustice done, and then we get this sense of, as Aristotle puts it, this sense of catharsis, because we see the good guys win and the bad guys get their comeuppance. And we have this frame which sort of, there must be something in us which goes, as you said, Mark, because we're denied it in life so often, the satisfaction of seeing that kind of thing. There must be something, I would guess, transcendent in us that appeals to it, probably an ideal.
Right.
I did want to say something about that just quickly.
Well, so I want to also say that, like, your understanding of justice might not be justice. It's like, oh yeah, you're chasing a goose. Like,
yeah, that's Plato's Republic right there. Because in Plato's Republic, you got different guys, you know, debating with Socrates, exactly what you said. Famously, the guy Thrasymachus, who's saying, well, justice is basically whatever the people who are in power say it is.
Right.
So you're not wrong. It's been debated for thousands of years.
Well, yeah, I was going somewhere else, right? Like Vervaeke talks about this thing where his kid is doing the thing, and then he's looking at the kid, and he's looking at the thing that the kid is trying to do, and then he has this bigger perspective, and he can hold more than the kid, right? And like, we're always in the position of the kid, right? And then if we take this ineffable perspective, then we can start understanding our position in the world in a different way, right? And then our understanding of justice can transform as a consequence of that understanding.
That presupposes, and I won't go too far, but it presupposes again that justice is in the ineffable, as Mark put it. Is that not so?
No, I don't think that presupposes anything. It just means that you get contrast and you get a better understanding.
Do you get justice? Do you get a sense of justice by virtue?
No, you get a better sense of justice. You don't get the whole thing, right? Like, and in some sense, it's going to be inaccessible to us. And like, I think our religions all say that, right? Like when you're dead, right? Like, then the thing happens, right? It's not in this life that the tallies are made up or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, another rabbit hole. I'll pass.
All right, moving right along then. We'll get to the last three here. So you, in order to better yourself, right, you have to have an ideal to go after, right? But and this gets back into reciprocal opening, like it has to be infinite or something. It has to be at least so much larger than you that it's unattainable, because if it's just the group, you're going to run into that problem again where the group's going to corrupt as the result of you taking over the group, for example, right? And so you need that third thing, that third perspective, in order to get this psychological affordance correct and provide that orientation and that adjustment. Otherwise, you can't really get better outside of the concept, outside of the confines of the group. So you need that highest, that's higher, right? So there's always a higher, and without that, again, it doesn't provide the contrast. You can't get there. So personal betterment, right? Whether you define betterment as more wisdom or more knowledge, or it doesn't even matter what you define betterment as. You need that psychological affordance so that you have that higher goal, that higher aim. And so the next one is immortality. Like, you need a way to deal with the fact that immortality is not apparently yours, at least not in the material objective reality that we like to inhabit and hold on to so dearly. And it's related to the time component, right? But just as birth is sort of unintelligible to us, to Sam Harris's point, like we don't know why we were born, or if we chose to be born, or what that even meant, right? We also don't know why we stop being born and die. I mean, we have no idea. And that gets into the idea of, well, then we're here for some period of time, indeterminate, and then it's not just about the death, the end. It's also about, well, what the hell do we do in the middle? And this goes back to betterment too, right? Like, well, what we need a frame to hold all that, right? We need some way to relate to this journey that we're on from birth to death, and the fact of our death, and what that means. And normal religions seem to give you an answer to that one way or the other, whether it's the reincarnation cycle until you get out of it, or it's the all going to be in heaven together sort of a thing, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But that psychological affordance needs to be there. It's very important. And it ties, all these tie together to some extent, right? And RTNAR needs to address that. Like it needs to have a frame for immortality, whether it's denial of existence of immortality or something else. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to deal with the issue, right? It needs to provide that psychological affordance in order to be successful for people. And then the last one is the point of orientation itself, right? So again, that perspective gives you the psychological ability to orient as such, but not just the tools to orient, but also the thing to orient to. And that's ultimately what we're talking about. You need the higher ideal that everybody can look at, not decide for themselves, not decide as a group, that's a cult, but everybody can look at outside of the group, outside of yourself, outside of both of those things. That gives you the idea of orientation as well as the tools to do orientation, right? And that third point, that higher point, is the thing that does that. And without that, you psychologically, you can't do a bunch of things in life, which isn't to say you can't be successful in life. You absolutely can without orientation, at least for some values of success. But what you can't have is ultimate success. And, I would argue that number 12, obviously, I've argued it all along, right? It goes right back through the stack all the way to number 1. Like, this is the thing that you need. This is why you need the higher frame. You're not really going to have a way to get around that. And RTNAR needs to deal with that. It needs to deal with the idea of orientation per se. And, you'll notice I entered in through the idea of perspective, right? And then, made the case for orientation, made the orientation case through the 12, and now I'm wrapping it back to the beginning and saying, yeah, orientation is the most important sort of component that we need psychologically in order to have a frame in which we can operate towards wisdom, towards betterment, towards whatever. And it gets us out of all these smaller frames that are destructive or ultimately don't last through time, or both in many cases. So how do you like the last three here?
Anyway,
Yeah, these are really big, right? Like personal betterment is a thing that I'm trying to get a grasp on. Failing. I don't fail at many things. At least trying to understand them. Component of faith definitely required for me. The orienting problems, which is the last one in that process, are, if taken seriously, so paralyzing that you can't move. Yeah, the that thing is well, a thing that we need to do in more ways than one, right? We need to relate to it as a community. We need to have rituals around it. We need to have all of that stuff, and maybe that as part of our identities have to die over time. Rituals for those as well. Maybe this fractal connection there that can be drawn upon. Yeah, and orientation. Yeah, if you take it seriously, that's just killing you. You can't do that on your own. You're always appealing to these things that you, when asked about, can not really make a good case for, comprehensively explain, even to yourself. Yeah, where is that pointing at, right? Like, what is the thing that's relating to?
let me jump on that. What stood out to me about point 12 was where it's pointing to is something pure, to quote Mark's comment. Something pure. So if we're talking about something pure existing as ineffable, what does that actually mean? Again, a quality question. A question of quality, I should say. I'm leaving that hanging. Again, I'm not interjecting anything there.
Yeah, that goes to Plato's forms or something like that. There's been many constructions to look at the pure whatevers.
Yeah, look, it's hard for me not to dredge up one of our most famous prime ministers here in Australia, a guy called Paul Keating. He's famous because he was absolutely scathing on the parliament floor in terms of the way that he would absolutely mock and ridicule his political opponents. It's quite funny, but he was just an enormously effective prime minister from the 80s and the 90s. They interviewed Paul Keating here in Australia, and what was interesting was he was talking about ideals, like you said, Mark. And this is an incredibly pragmatic guy. One of his quotes is, we all leave here in a pine box, in terms of talking about what it is to be a politician. So he was just like, I'm going to go hell for leather the whole time. But, in reflecting on his way of doing things, Paul Keating was saying, you've got to have ideals to strive for. Now, he's talking from a leadership perspective. You've got to be able to look out and aim for something that's better. I'm not quoting him verbatim, but I'm trying to bring in a perspective which isn't ineffable, but points towards it. I'm coming from the purely practical, as a man who ran the country, you know, and before that was in charge of the economy and did a very good job, depending on your point of view. So again, because it's such a wide net we're talking about here, I am trying to bring it back to how to be helpful with regards to religion that's not a religion. So I guess the question of, does the ineffable hold the ideal within it? Is that what we're talking about? Question mark. Immortality is way too big. I'm gonna drop it. Impossible, again, not to mention, however, Heidegger, who is the guy who said, okay, we're thrown into the world, we don't get a choice. That's a quality of what it is to be human, like you were saying, Mark, about Sam Harris and so on. And his point of view was also that once we're dead, we're dead. Death is the final horizon. I suppose he's a bit like, is it the Epicureans who are saying, look, you don't know if there's an afterlife or not, so don't worry about it.
Right.
But so what does Heidegger say? He says, well, that space in between, to quote you, Mark, is about being there. You're in the world. You're here. Understanding that is meaningful. So maybe for religion that's not a religion, he should be, and I'm sure that John Vervaeke injects a lot of this into it, referred to at the very least. Personal betterment to me goes back to that whole aiming for ideals. So, yeah.
So yeah, I want to respond to Heidegger. It's like,
yeah,
well, good that he could do it, right? But like that's the solution for him, not for humanity.
Yeah, and again, you know, most of this is like the purpose of this. Again, like if you go back through the slides, right, and we're talking about these problems that need to be addressed within RTNAR. Right? These are problems that RTNAR needs to address, and then why orient? What do we orient on? What is formation? How do things impact our formation? We need checks and balances. Where are these answers? And then there's psychological affordances. We need these things addressed within that. And, you know, the outside above, whatever you want to call it, Plato's forms, however you want to, you know, I don't know. Like RTNAR is not a thing yet. So, but I think it needs to address this stuff. Like, and that's really what we're talking about, right? Organization and formation are important. They're really, really important. Otherwise, you don't have a thing. And so, you know, a lot of people like to philosophize because then they don't have a thing and then nothing's broken. And whatever you build is perfect because you're just talking about it. And there's no reason to worry about it. Oh, it's perfect, right? And I think that's very much the point, is that these are the sorts of things that RTNAR needs to be able to address. And I'll just sort of end the slideshow there and, you know, just stress the reason why this is here, like the reason why I did this, because again, it, you know, it might seem a little harsh or whatever, but I think this is part of the problem definition, right? Or part of the set of problems that need to be addressed within a religion that is not a religion. And I don't really see a way around that, you know, and that's not the exhaustive list by any means, but I don't see a way around that whole idea. And I think what people are resistant towards is this perspective, because that's where all the problems come in. Where's this third perspective coming from? What does it represent? Does it represent Plato's forms? Now we have to define Plato's forms. And what's the authority under which Plato's forms are referenced. Because you can't just say Plato's forms and therefore, that's not going to work. So, RTNAR has to deal with this stuff. Like, it's out there. It's stuff that has to be addressed. And that's why I folded it in this way. And I thought it went nicely with Manuel's slideshow, and that flowed nicely from your original one. So, Jules, you did such a good job with that. So it just kind of flowed from that in my mind. And, this is sort of like, well, this is what's here. This is what we're dealing with as humans. And how do you, as a religion full of humans, or a religion that's not a religion full of humans, address these human issues? Because if it doesn't address human issues, I don't know what it's doing. Because people is the problem. We are the solution and the problem, but we have to address the problem part of ourselves, not the solution part of ourselves.
Oh, yeah, totally. I'd like to talk to that. And thank you for the presentation. I mean, the amount of thought and the depth of it, I mean, it's so stimulating to be talking about it. And thank you. And thank you too, Manuel. I know you two are a team, and a lot of what comes out is just the product of you guys laboring, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and a lot of other people too. Like,
yes,
a lot of
as you said,
realize that they contributed, and it was good to give this presentation because obviously I've never done it before, and I got a lot out of the back and forth and the feedback that we didn't have otherwise. To Manuel's point, we haven't touched this list in a long time, right? Every once in a while we added to it, but we never went back and looked at it until now. So it was very helpful for Manuel's feedback and for your feedback, Jules, to kind of there's more here, right? We always knew there was more there, but now we get to flesh it out a little bit more. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So
right, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. We're gonna go with ineffable. How can you top that? But yeah, there's one thing that came up really recently where there's an ethical implication that I want to highlight, right? Like, when you make a system, and a lot of systems have been made in history, you are responsible for what you put in the world and the consequences of it. And when you're talking about a thing like RTNAR, like, that has really, really big consequences for people's personal lives, and also if it works on how societies orient themselves and all that stuff. So yeah, just one thing to ponder over as well.
A little humility there. Is that what you're pointing at?
Yes.
I completely agree. I mean, I started off on a cautious note, and maybe if it's all right with you, Mark, I mean, this was your kind of spotlight, as it were. I was hoping we could maybe bring it back to the question of religion that's not a religion, for the sake of the people for whom it's designed. By which I mean, again, listening to John and Zevi go over this again, remembering the starting place, which is John Vervaeke. This is his idea, and he pitched it originally as a tentative idea, a super tentative idea. To your point, Manuel, I think he's applying the appropriate caution. I don't think he's being trivial when he puts this forward. I do think when he says, I am just trying to help, he means it. And I think also that John cares about the people for whom he is trying to help, which is what he calls the nuns.
Right.
So this idea of religion that's not a religion is meant to be a pathway for people who won't subscribe to traditional religion, and won't either subscribe to an ideology. So see a gap that needs to be filled by something new. And if I'm taking John the right way, he's saying we have the capacity now, by virtue of our age, I suppose, in history, to take the best of the wisdom traditions and the best of modern science and to exact them and to home them, I think is the way that he words, in a worldview, I'm pretty sure is what he says again, to service people who feel like they just aren't going to go one way or the other.
Right.
So with what we've shared and discussed, how do you guys feel like we could serve that end? Is it by being cautious or something else?
So, yeah, I guess, again, by way of disclosure, right?
Yeah.
Not a fan. I think the whole idea is mad, literally mad. I think it's crazy. People start religion all the time. Every day, new religions being started, and they all fail. The fact that we have any at all is a statistical anomaly, according to science. If you just did the math, you'd figure out, like, how do we have any religions that lasted more than 30 or 40 years? Like, it's impossible. It seems impossible mathematically. So there's something there that science doesn't understand. There's some randomness, right? Like, and why are people nuns? What is it that they're resisting, right? And I think that to some extent, what I pointed out was a perspective outside of yourself or outside of any group that you narcissistically want to cohere to. That's what you're missing. You're missing the ability to humble yourself to the fact that you're so insufficient. You just know almost nothing about the world, and all the knowledge that's been built up over thousands of years, right? Religion seems to be older than farming. That's weird. So we seem to need it more than farming as a group, as a species. That's kind of interesting. I mean, unless you don't take evolution seriously, that's a different problem. Not going to get into the evolution argument. I believe evolution is a true observation of the world, even if it's maybe not a science. I certainly believe that evolution is correct. Then you're ignoring thousands of years of knowledge. For what reason? Like, what gives you the authority that you think you know better than an established religion on how these things work? And what are you resisting? You're resisting the authority. You're resisting the authority of the perspective of the ineffable. That's what you're resisting in all cases. And do I think there's a way around that? No, because I think that is the answer. Like, the answer is the thing that the nuns are resisting are the things they need, and they're not ever going to do without it. And I'm sorry. I just, and maybe I'm wrong. Be happy to be proven wrong. But so far, I haven't even seen a good faith attempt at addressing the issues and doing what John talked about, which is start with problem definition and borrow from the existing religions. It'd be nice if somebody were working on that. We'll say, aside from Manuel and I, because we seem to be doing the most work on RTNAR for some reason, even though I think Manuel sort of agrees, at least in part, with my idea that project is mad and one shouldn't put, say, too much time into it. But the time I think we've put into it is specifically around not debunking the idea or anything like that, because that's not our intent. Our intent really is to help them to maybe realize something. And if that leads to RTNAR, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too, as long as it leads to something better or something good for them. Maybe just a realization that maybe they need to re-examine their beliefs, and maybe their original beliefs were good enough or better enough, or could help them in ways they didn't understand. But I think that the main thrust is RTNAR as a project that can move forward is maybe not the best way for most people to move forward. Even if they're nuns today, they can have a realization that there's an easier path out there for them, except for the hardest thing. But they're going to have to do that hardest thing, whether RTNAR exists or not.
So I'm going to call on Peterson again. There's going to be something on top of your value hierarchy. You either get to choose it or it chooses you. And you want to be in the first group. That's the argument that should be made to everybody. like this is real, like take your poison, and then, well, what can you do? Well, I'm gonna go Peterson again, right? Like if you if you're like get yourself in order, you can be a force for good in the world. You can kind of meet people where they're at and get them a step closer to where they need to be. And yeah, I don't think there's a way around doing that. Trying to, well, yeah, the question is also like what do people need, right? Like I think people need a couple things, right? They need a sense of safety and security from where they can get their act together. They need a way to orient themselves, and we often do that by following people. So maybe be the example that people can follow, and provide people the psychological safe haven that they need to step out from. And then, yeah, like open them up, right? Like the reciprocally opening element. Like I'm gonna go with Van Dyck, like God draws you in, wherever that in means, and like that's irrelevant. Like as long as you're open to it, like the things that you need to learn will be learned.
Well, I like the thread that both of you guys are spinning there, and I think it'd be remiss because we are members of the community not to mention the passionate inputs of people like Voloskin on this subject, and Struan, who's often his interlocutor, and another one called Uber. I cannot pronounce it. Uber Herogenic. Sorry. I know that there's good faith, deeply felt, passionate work on this subject. And I don't mean to be patronizing in any way by saying that, other than to recognize we're part of a community where that exists. And I suppose that the thread of what I'm picking up from both of you is like anything else. It's like, well, you know, I respect your religion. My job is to be supportive in a way that has integrity. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I suppose that's something I resonate with if it's something close to the sentiment that you guys feel.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. Thank you for that. I think for my part, look, I mean, RTNAR is important to John, right? And in that way, it's important to me, right? And so that I've done some facilitation and setting up some tech and whatnot for the RTNAR group in the past, right? I'm, not complaining about that or anything, right? Help to kind of herd the cats and whatnot, and we're committed to the community and getting things rolling that the community is interested in, even if we don't think necessarily that that's the right way to go or a feasible goal or whatever. I mean, that's community is not about getting things perfect, at least not for me. I'm a pragmatist. I calculate casualties first, right? We're going to do things that aren't going to work. We're going to do lots of things that aren't going to work. That's the majority of what's going to happen. And then hopefully we get some gold nuggets out or some diamonds or whatever, right? Hopefully some beauty emerges from that. And so, I welcome all of the involvement of all the people, right? I'm not trying to tamp anything down or dash anybody's hopes, but there's also a pragmatic side and a realist side that says, you're not taking this seriously enough. You really gotta like dig in. And this is why you have to dig in. And again, it's helpful to our work because we're more focused on the practices and what that means and how that interrelates. And like, that's why the psychological affordances are there. Like, oh, if there's a practice that's not in line with the psychological affordances for us, it's like, should we be doing this? do we know how this interrelates, right? It's part of, we'll say, the larger schematization, right? Oh, these practices might be affording us something psychologically. We can schematize on that. There's a bunch of ways in which this conception is useful. And yeah, I want people to know and understand and appreciate that, and not just look at this as like some sort of blanket criticism in terms of meant to shoot anything down. It's more meant to say, look, this is a serious topic. There's some serious issues, and these are some serious things that you need to really consider in order to move forward, because otherwise you're not going to move forward. Like there are goals that have to be accomplished in order for the religion that is not a religion to become a thing in the world that is useful to other people. And I'm all about useful to other people.
Spot on. I think it bears mentioning as well, one of the good things that I like about you, Mark, and I see it in you, Manuel, is the kind of recognition that moment by moment, most of it is probably wrong. But you guys just keep on going. And I think that's really helpful in the community. Can I make that point? Just for there to be, a sense of constancy where people are saying, here I am, I'm being myself. I want to participate, and I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. Here we are. I just want to acknowledge that I see that. I think it's really, for me, I think it's great as someone who tends towards perfectionism.
No, thank you.
So did you guys, go ahead, Manuel.
Yeah, well, so about the not being perfect, right? Like it's well, maybe we can go back to the affordances of the ineffable. Like, where are you aiming, right? Like what are you looking at? Are you looking at the manifestation, or are you looking at the idos that is being represented in the manifestation? And where do you get your satisfaction from, right? Like, do you get your satisfaction from the relationship with the idos, or do you get your satisfaction from the relationship with the instantiation of the thing? And I can tell you that a lot of problems will disappear if you stop caring about the instantiations.
Well, funnily enough, I suppose what I'm aiming at is the perfect. Is that sufficient answer?
Well, the perfect, and who's the judge of that, right? But yeah.
Well, I think that's at the heart of it. But I mean, I know there's advice in what you're saying, and I suppose my admission of perfectionism is more not a boast. Let me put it that way, but something that I, like you've been saying, work on and acknowledge. To be honest, that's something Jordan Peterson's been very good about with Big Five and whatnot. You've got to be able to say, well, this is my starting point. That's where I'm heading out from as I try to get better. But I thought maybe, did you guys want to have a final word before we close up that might maybe put a cap on our really fun and interesting dialogos about religion that's not a religion?
Well, yeah. So I think, and I think this is to John's credit, right? Like John is focusing more on the practices. I think doing something around cultivation and spreading of practices would be beneficial, and I'd rather see the energy go there, and people actually practicing them as well, because and maybe find ways how that is sustainable over longer periods of time, because like that's really hard for people.
Yeah, I just we got Jonathan Peugeot to do a Q&A for us on the Awakening from Meaning Crisis Discord channel, and there's a copy of that up on our YouTube channel, right? And he was asked, Brett actually asked him about, well, what do you think about practices, right? And he gave what I thought was just a devastating and heartbreaking answer from my perspective. I think Manuel sort of felt the same way, although maybe he's in trauma, so he'll never admit it again. oh, practices are great, but really what you need is a church so that you go do something that you don't want to do with people you don't like. And it occurred to me that, wow, doesn't that sound like a recipe to solve all of our disagreements? Like, how do you navigate disagreement as such with people which you have disagreements with? Oh, you go to a place and you do something that maybe you don't like all the time, right? With people you don't like, right? I'm not saying you don't like everybody there, but like there are people at a church that you won't like. I don't care which church you go to. I don't care how small it is, right? You're going to find something about someone you don't like. It's going to be like, oh, right. And then learning how to navigate that. And then I often have this thing where I'm like, we should have a law that says if there's 4 people in your house, you can only have 1 bathroom, right? Because then you're going to be forced to fight for resources, vital resources, right? And then it's going to give you the skills to live in the world that we have today. And that was very much the world that you know, maybe our parents or grandparents or whatever grew up in, was they had to fight for resources with their own family. And you know, like I have deep disagreements with most of the people in my family, so I know all about this. I navigate this all the time. Every time I go back up to New England, you know, there's stuff that people do that, you know, we don't necessarily like. And learning, and if you have to love them because you're in the same roof or under the same roof or whatever, and you know, then maybe you get a set of skills that maybe we're lacking in the world today. And maybe the secret really is that you have to do things you don't want to do with people you don't want to do them with. And all towards the aim towards that higher good, right? With that extra perspective. Like maybe that is the only solution to the quote political, which I don't think is political at all, problems that we see today. It's just we don't know how to navigate disagreement per se. We don't know how to disagree with people in a friendly way, and we don't know how to move past disagreement. And the only way to learn that is to do it in some sense. It's participatory knowledge in nature, right? And the only way to gain participatory knowledge is to do things. To Manuel's point, back to practices. But Pajot's point is, oh, practices by themselves are not enough. And maybe he might be right about that. It hurts me deeply to think about it, but I have to presence it because I think, you know, maybe Pajot's right, and that's hard. That's really hard.
Sounds like commitment a lot. Also, okay, well, I think we can sign off, and thank you again, Mark, for a really thoughtful presentation. Thank you too, Manuel, for your deep thinking and practical application, especially, and constant interest, which is like a spark. It's very good. Can I also just sort of and say thanks to anybody who's participated and watched and commented and taken anything away from this? I hope people who have participated can sense the good faith. That really is important, that this isn't just a kind of a tear down exercise. We're all part of this, and we're trying to deal with it on its own terms. So finally, Manuel and Mark, do you guys have some outputs that people can participate in, or ways to connect with you that you wanted to talk about quickly, Manuel?
Well, I always hang out on the Discord. I invite people for discussion, comments, whatever helps my thinking.
Yep.
I think, again, right, practices, we need participation, whether it's in real life or on the Discord. I invite people to do more of it.
Yeah, I got to back that up. We have daily meditation, right? We're not just philosophizing. A lot of people stumble across, they accuse of philosophizing. I say, yeah, we have a daily meditation. What are you doing? And then they run away because they're not doing anything. And yeah, I would invite people to the Discord server. I hang out there quite a bit. Obviously, comments on the video. Like if people have questions or want to see more, I mean, I think we've pretty much rounded this out. I think but there's so much depth to your point earlier, Jules, right? There's so much depth. And, you know, maybe if enough people requested it or something, we could go into depth about, like we could talk about virtues, or like there's a dozen different topics around the RTNAR thing that we could go on discussing forever. And then also I have a YouTube channel called Navigating Patterns. and anybody's welcome to plug in navigating patterns. It's sort of, we're still in pre-launch, but there's a lot of videos there, so you can engage with that. And then I did some talks with Karen Wong and a couple with Paul Vanderclay on their channels. Karen Wong's channel is The Meaning Code. I did an early talk with her about our 4 Ps of knowing, which is a little bit different from John's. But then more recently, we've been in the middle. In fact, I just got done doing a video with her and then went into this video. We've been doing a series on the Peterson-Vervaeke talk, and that, especially with the newer episodes there, has gone into other areas along these lines, where I talk about some of the models and some of the things that I'm on about, we'll say. And yeah, I always invite people to come onto the server and just chit chat with us and whatnot. And we have a website, meaningcommunity.com, that we're trying to sort of bootstrap and get going for people with forums and all the rest of it, and articles. And I invite people to join up there. And I'll probably put the slides from this presentation on there. We've already got the 4P slides up there, or 4P slide, I should say. And we'll be putting more stuff up there as time goes on. And so I invite people who are interested to get involved and actually, participate with us as we go on this journey, trying to engender wisdom per se, right? And sort of solve, if you will, or at least offer some tentative solutions to the meaning crisis.
Well said. So I'm doing the meditation too with Valeria and Manuel there. Best thing, I agree with you. Do the practices. It's good advice. So thank you both, Mark, Manuel. It's been very, very good. Hopefully we'll do more over time. I'll stop the recording.